First of all, welcome to my first press conference as a director of the Department of Ag here for the state of Illinois. We just thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of introduce myself to some of you folks. I spent a little time in Springfield over the past decade and a half, but I've been gone for a couple years as well. So thought it would be an opportunity for you folks to ask me some questions about myself and the agency, and I thought maybe I might start out and just kind of give you a little bit of background. I've been on the job 8 days now, so obviously I've got everything figured out. No, answers to all the problems, but not really. So it's been kind of like drinking out of the fire hose, as they like to say. And but it's really truly an honor to be here and to be the director of an agency that I've and an industry that I think a tremendous amount about. I was born and raised on a farm in western Illinois, live on a grain and livestock farm right now up in just west of here in Schuyler County, and spent about 20 years in the family real estate and auction business. Then I decided to run for the Senate back in '02 and was successful, and was in that position from actually sworn in January of '03 and up until the beginning of '17. So it was about 14 years. After that, I went back to the family real estate and auction business, and during that time, of course, kept operating our small grain and livestock farm there in Rushville. So I was asked by Governor Pritzker then Governor-elect Pritzker, I guess, to serve on the Ag Transition team, to be one of the co-chairs of that committee. And that was a fabulous experience. Really met a lot of great people, and we had a great discussion about agriculture here in the state. So I guess with that background, I don't know if anybody's ever qualified to do a position, but I do feel like I have a pretty rounded life experience with regard to agriculture, and on the legislative side, of course, serving in Springfield for 14 years. So. With that, I'd like to just kind of turn it over to you folks and see what kind of questions that you might ask. Yes, sir.
What are your top priorities being a farmer and knowing the legislature, and what are the things that the legislature's impeding on farmers? What can they get out of the way of farmers? And what are some of the top priorities?
Yeah, good question. So some of the top priorities, obviously there's a lot going on in agriculture right now. Last year, the General Assembly passed an industrial hemp legislation, and the department is in the process of, they've created the rules for that program. There is a lot of excitement and a tremendous amount of excitement out in the rural parts of the state about industrial hemp and the opportunities that it could provide for farmers. I grow corn, soybeans, wheat, clover. That's my main crops that I produce on my farm. But to have the opportunity, I think the ag community is very excited to have the opportunity to grow, diversify their portfolio, so to speak. So I printed out the rules for the industrial hemp program. I've been reading through them. Right now they're taking what are they taking? Public comments. Thank you very much on that. And so we're going to work our way through that process. But there's a lot of excitement. So I see it as an opportunity for diversity. I also see it as an opportunity for job creation. And that is something that really, when I served on the Ag Transition team, that was something that came out time and time again, that opportunities, especially for young people, but for anybody in the rural parts of the state, give them other opportunities so that they can stay in Illinois and certainly in the rural parts of the state. So that's one area that we're going to be focusing on.
When it comes to the regulations and whatnot, do you see them as being too burdensome, or how should they, be regulated evenly?
So while we're in the comments portion of this, it's been recommended that I not really comment as to what I think. I think that the department has put the rules out there, and as we accept those comments, we may make adjustments as we go down the line.
You talked about state government having been hollowed out over the last 15 years. What percentage of jobs at the Department of Agriculture are vacant?
I don't have the exact numbers, just round numbers from what I have been told, that at one time and we can verify this with some of the very qualified people sitting in the room here. But I think at one time there was around 600 employees. I think there's approximately 325 to 350 right now. So there has been a drastic reduction that has come over probably the last 16, 17 years.
What kinds of jobs are they, and what does that mean? What does that translate to? What's
Honestly, I haven't had a chance to look into all of that, but they certainly, I know on the marketing, on the promotion of ag side of it, that there's been a huge reduction in that area. I know that the department used to be a lot more proactive as far as going and developing markets, not just around the country, but literally around the world with employees and staff in some different countries to try to promote Illinois agriculture. I know those have obviously, many of those have been scaled back or simply reduced. So that's just one area. Oh, time will tell. I mean, it's all budget driven. The state of Illinois, obviously, we have our fiscal problems. So my hope and desire is, and when I talked to Governor Pritzker about some of the things that we'd like to see for agriculture, many of those require resources, staff and resources, and so we have to, and you have to look at the big picture with the state of Illinois as far as its fiscal situation and try to, we're going to try to be a part of that solution, but also be a part of trying to grow the economy and so we can create more opportunities here in the state.
As a soybean farmer, then you've seen what the president's trade war with China has done to price of soybeans,
Yeah.
specifically
Mm-hmm.
$52 maybe a bushel gone. If the IDOA had the promotion staff, if they were able to do that, do you think that would be a value back to the farmer? Could that be something that can be return on investment out and say it's worth the price at a higher price?
I would sure like to think so. I think what we're going to have to do as an industry, as an ag industry, and not just with soybeans and pork and other commodities, we're going to have to. We spent literally decades and decades developing those relationships and those trade relationships with China and other countries, and to have so to speak the rug kind of pulled out from under us with regard to trade, we're going to have to turn around and redevelop and rebuild the trust in those with those countries and those organizations. But I think we also have to look at trying to expand the market as well. So look for other opportunities where we could do trade. And somebody must have arrived. Hello, Governor. Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you.
Welcome to the Department of Ag.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Good to see you.
You bet.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah, we're just getting started with our press conference here and talking about agriculture and trade right at the moment. So, what would you like to join in, or how do you want to do
So you're showing off your wares in front of all the experts here. I just wanted to take a moment, first of all, to welcome you, to thank you for being our, of course, Secretary of Agriculture designee, and also to let you know that as a result of the fundraising that we did around the inauguration, that we're going to be delivering to you and to the Fairgrounds Foundation a check for $800,000 to support the work of the foundation.
Well,
so
thank you very much. My
bet.
land, we can put that money to good use out here.
I've heard that. I've heard that. I'm terrific. I'm
thank
really
you.
pleased to do that.
Well, we're excited to hear that news, and we hadn't really got into talking about the fairgrounds itself and the work that needs to be done, but boy, that'll be a big start in that whole process, so we appreciate that.
Well, I know I called John Clayton, the chairman, to let him know that we're going to be delivering that check to the foundation, and let him know that I was coming here to let you know.
Wonderful.
So,
wow, thank you very much, Governor.
Glad to do
Appreciate
it. Thank you. And as you also know, we divided the money that we were giving to charitable organizations between the foundation here as well as the Cabrini Green Legal Assistance Foundation. So they're also receiving a check for $800,000 to support their work up north. So,
oh gosh, that's just fantastic. We
Glad to do
appreciate it very much. I hadn't got a chance to tell folks about the conversations that the governor and I had leading up to my accepting, him offering and my accepting the position, but every time I've met with JB, I've been more and more impressed with his ability, his leadership skills, his ability to listen and not be talking all the time, which I think is a great leadership quality. And so, Governor, I just really want to appreciate, I really want to thank you for this opportunity to lead this agency, and we're going to work together and do some great things for Illinois agriculture.
Well, the whole state's excited to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Good to
nice
see
to see you.
Thanks for stopping by.
Nice to see everybody. I know I saw a few of you earlier. Yeah, happy to take one question. I'm just on my way out. Sure.
Last week, the governor made a public point about joining the U.S. Climate Alliance and promoting the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Do you plan to have that will have any effect on the agriculture sector in Illinois, particularly livestock production, that sort of thing?
Well, I think absolutely that we can work with that plan, that overall plan. I guess it was last week, the department put on a program with producers around the country, around the state rather, that we're trying to reduce soil erosion. We're trying to reduce nutrient runoff, trying to conserve resources. I think that's a small step that we as a department can take. That's a department initiative, working with producers here in the state of Illinois. So I think I look forward to working with the governor towards an ultimate positive result for this climate.
What about waste emissions from livestock feeding operations?
I think we're open, obviously open to looking at that as well. Absolutely. I can't really speak to it specifically at the moment, but yeah, absolutely take a look at it.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Governor.
bet.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Come out again sometime.
I will. You know I will. See you soon.
Mr. Sullivan, what's going to be the John Sullivan style stamp on it that you and only you can bring?
So there's, I think only time will tell, but I guess my leadership style is such that I like to, I'm going to back up, Dave. When I was in the General Assembly, there was nobody that came to my office to lobby me on a bill unless they were prepared to answer questions about that legislation. So it's important to me to understand as much as I can about an issue before I make a decision as to how to move forward. And so it's one of the most frustrating parts about being a legislator, and I've told people this for years, is when you have somebody come into your office and they tell you one side of a story and they leave and somebody else comes in and they tell you the exact opposite point of view on the issue. And so it's very imperative on whoever's making the decision to try to sort through that and make a decision. So that's what I'm going to do here in this position as well. I haven't made very many promises over the years as far as legislatively, but I told folks when I took this job that, number one, I'll work very hard, and I'll put the hours in. I'll spend the time to understand, to make sure that I can understand the issues. Number two, I will educate myself on the issues. And number three, I'm going to try to make decisions based on what I think is best for agriculture, best for the state of Illinois. And, that's going to be my leadership style.
Can you talk a bit about the,
Maybe let a couple other people take a question here if they have one. You bet. Yeah. There's, so we work with the Fair Foundation and also, of course, CDB and other agencies here to identify priorities on the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds have been neglected for many years, and so there is a huge backlog of deferred maintenance and needs that need to happen here on the grounds. But we will identify where that money can best be used. I don't know if certainly the foundation's going to have some input on that, but we will make sure that the money is put to good use. Trust me.
Is there a possible go back to the General Assembly and ask for another $30 million after they appropriated the $30 million this last session to really start to do something here?
So obviously there's a lot of talk about an infrastructure bill here in Springfield and at the Capitol and for the state of Illinois. And so as those discussions move forward, I have heard, and you folks have reported, $190 million in a backlog of deferred maintenance here at the fairgrounds. I don't know where that number came from. The point of the matter is that there are a lot of needs out here. We've started, there have been some steps that have been taken to address some of it, especially with regard to the Coliseum, for example. But as the discussion with an infrastructure bill takes place, certainly we want to be a part of that discussion because our needs are quite extensive.
can you talk more about that?
And we'll get you next year in just a second.
Infrastructure issue, how are you gonna work with IDOT, how are you gonna work with the federal partners? Locks and dams are an issue, of course,
Yeah.
a lot of money, looking to fix those up. Highway systems, rail
Yeah.
systems as well, working for products.
Yeah. So I was, the last time the state of Illinois had a capital bill, I don't know what year it was, 2000 and probably what, 5, 6, 7, something like that, maybe 9. I was actually the sponsor of the legislation. I was actually sponsored in the Senate the legislation that carried the capital bill itself. So, and I was a part of the discussion as we put forth all the working groups to find out what the needs were for the state, roads, buildings, state buildings, economic development. And so all the different caucuses, all 4 of the caucuses, working with the governor, brought all the needs together. And we said, okay, here's what we need. Here's a list of needs for the state of Illinois, and education and schools and all that as well. So then honestly, that was kind of the easy part. Then the second part of it is trying to figure out how you're going to pay for it, right? So that whole process, I think, is going to be beneficial to me now as the director of the Ag, looking out for this agency and the maintenance needs that they have here, that I can go and meet with different senators and reps to say, and I think make a very credible case why this is important and why it should be included in the capital bill.
What are your thoughts on the state fair? Improvements, preserving it, director?
So my thoughts, I think that the State Fair is one of the showcase events for the entire state. I've been coming personally to the State Fair. I think the first time I came, I was 10 or 11 or 12. I spent a week sleeping in a hog barn, watching a neighbor's hogs. So I got a really interesting perspective of the fair at that point, and then certainly came back over the years. So I think the fair is a great event, certainly an economic engine for the area as well. And I want to do everything that I can to make it, the best fair that we possibly can have. And I tell you what, directors come and go. The people that really, understand not just the fair, but the entire Department of Ag, they're people that have been here for many years, and I'm going to rely on their expertise and knowledge to try to help make decisions, to really be the leader that the fair and the Department of Ag needs, so that we can kind of move forward and make it one of the premier events that it is.
The trouble is defining what is the best fair can be. You want a bunch of new stuff? Oh, gosh, it's changed, it's terrible. Or, oh, it's the same old stuff, there's no new stuff. You're not gonna please everyone, but to you,
Yeah.
what's the best way the fair can be?
A balance. And I've heard those same complaints over the years, Dave, as well. But certainly trying to find, trying to find a balance of where some of the older fair goers can appreciate and see the events that they like. That the younger crowd also has something that will draw them to the fair. From the horticulture line, from the horticulturist, and the living plants, a conservation area, the livestock area. I mean, it's always has had a great diversity to it, and certainly we want to continue that diversity, knowing that we're not going to please everybody all the time and on every day.
Timeline on a new manager.
Let me go ahead. Timeline on what?
On a new state fair manager.
We're working on it right now. That's of course, working with the governor, obviously, on that selection, and we have meetings set up currently to discuss that. But obviously, the fair, there's a lot of decisions being made right now as we sit here today, and certainly a fair manager, we need somebody in that position. But just because it's not filled at the moment, there's a lot of folks out there, working on different contracts and what have you with regard to the fair right now. But that being said, as soon as practically possible.
So, as you know, Congress recently passed a new federal farm bill.
Yep.
One of the few things that actually accomplished. Anything in that package, any new stuff that provides new opportunities for Illinois?
Yeah. Yeah, a great question. Honestly, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't honestly know at all. I haven't had a chance to really delve into the Farm Bill that much yet. I will say that there was some industrial hemp legislation included in it, which I do think enhances, what we're trying to do here in Illinois. From a farmer-producer standpoint, certainly gives the farm community the stability that they need. Kind of the floor, as far as protection from a producer standpoint. That is assuming that we don't face another shutdown, right? Yeah. Yeah.
In the event of another federal shutdown.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the department has actually been, pretty proactive, maybe kind of behind the scenes as far as trying to mitigate and reduce the impact of the shutdown on producers and business owners here in the state of Illinois. For example, the state does meat inspections at slaughterhouses and processing plants, and some of those are federally supported. And when the shutdown occurred, the state of Illinois came in and kind of backfilled some of that and tried to keep had to basically keep those meat inspectors in place. So I think that's a small step that we can do. In the big picture, if there's another shutdown, we actually had some discussions this morning about coming up with some ways that we can make sure that it does not impact farmers and producers here in the state.
Can you, another state fair question, do we need two of them?
Do we need two state fairs?
The Quincy State Fair.
Well, I tell you what, I think the DuQuoin Fair is a great fair as well. You could say, there are folks who say, I'm sure would say we don't need any fairs. There's others that say we need more than two. You have to look at what the DuQuoin Fair, the Springfield State Fair does, as an economic engine for those regions. And so we can't look at, it through, blinders. We have to look at the big picture, and that's certainly what we're going to try to do here.
So is it okay that, the state fair technically does take a loss year to year? It being one of those local economic engines, but
Yeah.
also able to showcase Illinois' manufacturing with
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah, and absolutely. So, whether, and I haven't, delved into when the fair makes money, when it doesn't, but the big picture is that you have to look at, the jobs that it creates, the ability to showcase agriculture here in the state of Illinois, and then certainly the, again, just the economic engine that it provides. Yeah.
There are a lot of, just sticking with that point.
Yep.
A lot of acreage still attached to that DuQuoin fairgrounds. Would that be an opportunity to generate money for the state when you desperately need it?
Yeah, I don't know how many acres is down at DuQuoin. Yeah, what's only 12? That doesn't sound like many to me. But at any rate, if we can find if there is excess land there that's not being utilized, and if we can find another way to utilize it and provide some other opportunities, certainly we would take a look at that. I'm going to be open. I'm going to keep an open mind as I move forward. Again, 8 days on the job, I don't quite have all this figured out. So. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
For a big gaming show this year, and of course that means that horse racing folks will come to the table. The waning industry in Illinois, would you insert yourself or the Department of Agriculture in those discussions to make sure that horse racing, that fits part?
Yeah. I was, during my 14 years in the Senate, obviously, I think that the Senate passed at least 3 gaming bills. At least 3, and I did support that legislation, and I was very involved with that legislation to try to provide a kickstart for the horse racing and horse industry here in the state of Illinois. If there's another gaming bill that gets introduced in the upcoming legislative session or at any time in the future, working with the standard bred and the thoroughbred folks, I would sure like to be involved in that discussion as well.
So we're kind of going from, at one point in time, a lawmaker to private business guy, back into this role of government, but
Yeah.
you're essentially the head of basically a regulatory agency. And so, if you would have worked on the side of the farmland reassessment
Right.
ag sales tax exemptions.
Sure.
What's your role now as compared to what it used to be, and how do you better fill it?
I think that's a great question because it obviously it depends on the issue, right? So we are the Department of Ag is a regulatory agency. We obviously a broad and varied field with regard to regulation, following state and federal regulations. And my role as a director is to follow and administer those rules and regulations. But there are other areas outside of the current regulation, especially when you're talking about moving forward and discussing new legislation. I'm not going to inject myself into the discussions unless asked to do that. So I do bring some knowledge to the table, and if there are folks that understand that both with my farming background, my private business background, as well as my legislative background, that I can add something, that I can show up to a committee and testify on an issue, I certainly, or somebody make a phone call and what do you think about this? I certainly would like to be, hope to be involved in that process. I think ultimately Governor Pritzker is going to make the decision as to how involved he wants his directors to be in some of these discussions. My hope and desire is that where I know and understand and feel like I'm knowledgeable on an issue, that I can indeed help move the conversation forward.
Is the agency and private business and farmers in a right spot when it comes to the use of dicamba over the top of soybeans for another year? EPA just sent out that new label 3 or 4 months ago. You're trying to train people to be certified applicants now in order to use
Right.
that. Has that gone well? Is that going to work?
So has what gone well?
Well, as the retraining of all those people,
Yeah.
get them
Certified, yeah.
a different
Mhm.
certified
Yeah.
name under them than they had to get last year to this year. I mean, is it going to be in a good spot? Is it going to work well?
There's been huge participation in the training sessions. There's been a lot of interest. I think folks certainly understand the importance of the pest herbicide training programs. And so I think that whatever the department can do to help educate the public, certainly the applicators and the folks that are working with those chemicals, I think that obviously we can make a situation better as we move forward.
Do you plan to pursue a state label on dicamba?
I'm sorry?
Do you plan to pursue a state label for dicamba?
We are going to, we've already had some discussions with the stakeholders. We're going to continue to have more discussions with stakeholders, and then working with them, the department will make a decision then. So we don't, as we sit here today, don't really have an answer to that question.
I know you've only been on the job for, what do you say, 9 days, but you also served on the transition committee. So
Yep.
is there anything that you learned on the transition committee or in your first week of work that kind of shocked you about the management of the department in recent years?
I don't know if it shocked me. I will say the group, the committee, the Ag Transition Committee, when I first saw the list, I was, number one, I was impressed because of the diversity of the list. But number two, I was concerned about how large. We had 25 to 30 members there, and trying to coordinate and get everybody kind of going the same direction. I was very concerned about that. But once after our first meeting, I was so impressed with the everybody's ability to bring their issues forward. And so when I talk about the diversity, we had folks from representing urban ag. We had folks from obviously all the different commodity groups. We had rural development folks. We had economic development folks. And everybody, when we kind of made our introductions and we laid out kind of what our goals were for the group, everybody just kind of put their own, maybe some of their own personal issues aside and tried to move forward to come up with a plan that we could present to the governor that would improve agriculture. And we expanded it, not just agriculture, but rural development. And go ahead.
Top like 2 or 3 pressing issues that
Yeah. I'd say number one, broadband out in the rural areas of the state was just an issue that came up over and over and over again. And I can speak to that from my own home and location as well as our family business. Trying to get high-speed internet is very, very frustrating out in the rural areas of the state. And it is absolutely a hindrance to trying to do business. And so if we can't offer an environment which has the infrastructure so that people can conduct business in the rural parts of the state, they're going to move. It's you know, if they can't do it, then they're going to have to find other places to do it. So that was an issue that came up over and over again. And certainly Governor Pritzker, I was pleased to see him talk about it during his inauguration. You know, other areas, I guess, certainly hemp was on everybody's radar. So, and I've already talked a little bit about that, but certainly feel like there's going to be a lot of opportunities there. And I'd say the third area would be ag education. So just education in general. We had a lot of folks from the education fields that were on our panel, on our committee, and they certainly offering programs either in person or online, and that gets back to the high-speed, internet. But certainly having programs to offer educational opportunities to individual. That was, I'd say, those were the top three issues.
Got the budget address coming up next month.
Mm-hmm.
Do you anticipate the Department of Ag asking for more, less, or steady budgets, or what do you think?
Probably all of the above. I don't know what we're going to be asked, how much direction that we're going to be given, to present a budget that's a flat budget, or to present a budget that maybe sees a reduction, or, what do you need? What's your best case scenario? So I imagine that we're going to be working on all those numbers to try to come up with to try to meet the requests and the demands. I was asking folks this morning, I said, I sat on the other side of the desk when we were talking as a senator, when the committees came in, and I sat on the appropriation committees for many years, and they were all making their requests, and it's going to be a little bit different now to be on the other side of the desk, and they're going to be asking me those same questions that I was asking them.
We hear property taxes are a major issue. How much of an issue is property taxes in Illinois to farmers?
To farmers, the whole farmland assessment legislation is something that is certainly, I think, a farmer would say that's in their, their top, 2, 3, 4 items that is concerned. Obviously, a farmer has a number of acres. Most of them are pretty large operations. Property taxes is a huge issue, so it's a huge expense for them. It's even more of an expense when commodity prices are low, as they are right now. We have a lot of uncertainty in the world with regard to trade and commodity prices. So I'd say that's a huge issue.
For him, I know we're going through the public comment period right now. It would have to go to JICA. It might be set back for a second public comment period. You just talked about there's a lot of excitement from farmers. What's the urgency? What's the likelihood that farmers are going to be able to have that underground this year?
Well, there's a lot of factors, I think, that go into that. We want to make sure, as an agency, we want to make sure we do our due diligence with regard to making sure that the rules are adequate, that other factors that I know that everybody that's looking at hemp is looking at is, what's the availability of seed. We hear that the seed is very, very tight. It's going to be hard to come by. But I think at the end product is really probably the most important. We have to make sure that there is the processing at the end of the whole process, so that the final product can be put into use, however that is. So I don't know if there's an urgency. I guess the only urgency that I would see is that this isn't just Illinois that's looking at hemp. A lot of other states, if not most of the other states, are as well. So want to make sure that I would like to be out in front, but on the same hand, we want to do it in a fair and methodical way to make sure that we don't miss let something fall through the gaps that we aren't aware of.
I can't quite recall if it was specified in the rules, but I believe it's Kentucky, their Department of Agriculture sells the seed to the farmers so they can ensure what they're getting is the correct product. That's something that the Department of Agriculture is involved in.
I don't know. Yeah, not that I'm aware of, but
And then, well, you mentioned other states would have already had this as well. Is there any other areas that Illinois is kind of hope to emulate in addition to this, or are you kind of looking at him for that?
I guess I'm not sure. You mean just with regard to hemp?
Yeah, kind of
Yeah. I would assume that we are looking at what some of the other states have done or are doing. And, you know, if we find somebody that's already invented the wheel, there's no point in reinventing it, right? So I'm sure that we're going to be looking at other programs.
Yeah, changing gears, how do you feel about the state of conservation funding as it stands now?
Mhm.
Are there changes you want?
So I think conservation funding is obviously extremely important from the producer level. On my own farm, you know, I put in some conservation practices. I've changed my farming practices to try to reduce erosion and to conserve resources. So I would say that the producers and the farmers out there, you know, they want to be good stewards of the land. And certainly as a department, I mean, when you start talking about that, you're talking about funding, quite honestly. You're talking about additional money to do those types of programs. In a perfect world, we could, usually the best combination is local, state, and federal resources when you have participation by all those different entities, as well as the producer, the farmer level as well. That's when you get the most bang for your buck. So, you know, we'll be looking at what kind of opportunities that, you know, we could possibly come up with as we move ahead.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Sir?
Yes.
Also, there's also talk about legalizing.
I wondered when this question was going to come up.
Does that pose any potential hardships for the hemp producers if there's high-grade marijuana being grown in fields? And I'm not sure what the parameters of the
Mhm.
discussion are right now.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on any of those topics, but I will say that from talking to folks, both here in the agency as well as some of the medical marijuana producers that are the growers, I guess more in particular, that they're obviously the security that's involved with medical cannabis right now is critical. I think critical to the success of the program. If we get to a point where we're looking at recreational marijuana in the state, the department's role, I think, and hope would be to regulate the growing of it as we do now with medical cannabis. That hemp kind of falls into obviously a whole nother area, and you know, trying to make sure that we protect the integrity of all of those different products is going to be key. We've got some great people here, scientists, you know, biologists that will have done the research and do understand that, and certainly the department will do whatever we can to try to protect each of those investments. All right, very good. Well, I really appreciate you coming out today on a cold, windy day. Appreciate you coming, and if you ever have any other questions moving forward, be sure to get a hold of us. Thank you very much.